Welcome, I am Michelle, and this is Model Debut Nicola. This is a new fashion game for the Nintendo Switch, out only in Japan so far, and it is made by Furyu, and the publisher is Shinchosha, who is the publisher for the Nicola fashion magazine. And if you don't know, Nicola is a fashion magazine targeted towards teenage girls with teenage models, and it's very sort of the kind of thing you would expect young teenage girls to have. Very candy pop styles, lots of bright, colorful text all over the place, hearts and little, cute things like that. The main reason I decided to try this game is because I really liked the Style Savvy, or Girls Mode, games on the 3DS, and since there's not one on the Switch yet, I thought this might be a similar alternative. So let's see how it compares. So first we need to design our character, and since these are young girls, I think, they decided to make it where you can't really change their body style at all. You can mainly only change the face, and maybe that's a bit of a corner cutting, since they're not adults, they can kind of get away with it, but you can't really adjust your frame at all. So if you want to be taller or shorter or heavier or thinner, you really can't. You just have to be what they give you. And as an adult player, I do find that's a little bit limiting. Another thing that's very limited is that you do not have a choice of eye color. Now later on you can get contacts, colored contact lenses, but right away you do not have that. In fact, you also don't have a choice in some of your hairstyles. Later on you have the option to change the front and backs of your hairstyles and mix and match, but at the beginning you're much more limited. Now we have the option to change our eyes, our mouth shape, our eyebrows, our skin tone, our facial structure, and then also we can balance those out just a little bit. We can't change things like the position of the nose or the position of the mouth, so it's very limited in what you can do initially. With that done, we move on to hairstyles, and this is where the first problems with the game really start to appear. The hairstyles themselves, while fairly extensive in their variety of styles, often look a little bit jagged and not very well modeled in the 3D modeling of the game's design, and this is actually more noticeable when you're playing in the handheld mode when you've got the lower screen resolution than it is when you're in the 1080p resolution, and I'm not exactly sure why that is, but for whatever reason you really notice that there's a lot of jagged edges, and some of the individual strands of hair just look really out of place and really rigid and hard, and it doesn't look like a very smooth model. It looks like it took a little bit of corner cutting on, and I hate to say that because overall the game looked quite good, but the hairstyles are the first place where I felt that there was really a bit lack. And this actually highlights, no pun intended, the main problem that I've found with this game so far is that there's a lot of individual small minor elements that are just a little bit off, a little bit missing and lacking, and one of them, which you can tell while you're going through these menus, is that there's a real inconsistency with the way the controls are arranged. The controls can be a real problem here because sometimes in some menus, one button such as the D-pad or the L trigger will be used for one thing or for nothing at all, and then in another menu that's very similar to that, it will be used or it won't be used, and it's really hard to know because the game doesn't always tell you. In fact, at times, there's things like the ability to zoom in on a character's face with one of the L triggers that the game doesn't even show you on screen like it shows you what all of the other buttons do, and this is just a little bit lacking. Also, in this menu here where you can choose the highlights and shadows for your hair color, the way they designed it is that your cursor switches between the top and bottom box, and not with an actual button to switch between the two. And so what happens is, if you're dragging the cursor around in one menu, trying to sort of look around to feel your way through and find the color that you want, and you accidentally drag it too close to the border, you'll go into the bottom menu and then suddenly accidentally completely change the shadow that you had selected, and then suddenly you've lost what you did over the past 10 minutes, which is a bit disappointing considering all they had to do was create a border all the way around both boxes and just set the L button or something else to switch between the two. The system for choosing your own hair colors is quite interesting because it does allow you to choose the highlights and shadows individually, but what I've found is that it can be very difficult to get something that looks exactly the way you want it. because there's no options to individually adjust saturation and hue and that sort of thing, you're kind of limited by what you can sort of feel out with these boxes. And because of the way the individual highlights and shadows actually play out on the models themselves in the textures, it's kind of difficult to know where the right balance is. So it takes a lot of work to get the exact style and color that you're looking for. And since you're going to be changing your hair's colors a lot in this game, that's a bit of a disappointment. Nevertheless, these interfaces, while clunky and very confusing, do function, and once you've gotten a look that you really like, you can move on into the next part. Here is the all-important closet of clothes. Now, it's important to point out that in the beginning you have your own closet of clothing, which is fairly limited, and as you play the game, you will get more. However, anytime you're working for one of the production companies to take promotion photos and things like that, you're given the list of clothing that's available to that company, which is drastically more extensive than what you actually have in your own closet. So there is a search function which allows you to search for different keywords, which of course you need to know Japanese to a certain extent to be able to fully understand those keywords and those search functions. However, it does work fairly well. One problem that I have though is that when you go into the search function, if you put in some keywords, you press the plus button to perform that search. And so to get out of that menu, you have to press the plus button. However, if you then decide you don't want to do that search and you clear everything out, once you've cleared out all of your keywords, you can't press the start button to exit that menu. You have to press the minus button to exit the menu. Not B to cancel, not plus to continue on like you did before. No, you have to press minus to cancel out of that menu. And it makes no sense at all. And it's really clunky when you're trying to search for something and you think, okay, I want to clear this out now, and then I press, oh, that's the wrong button. There's a few other interface problems here as well, such as the inability to zoom in on your character to see your face and to see how different things interact together. Sometimes when you're choosing a fashion, for example your shoes, you can only see your feet and you can't zoom out. And there are sometimes, they don't always work, but there are sometimes buttons like one of the L triggers that allows you to zoom back out, but only when you're not in certain menus. Or if you hold it down and then deselect that menu, you can zoom back out again and then zoom in and so on and so forth. So it's really selective in when it allows you to zoom in and zoom out, but it also doesn't tell you can do this. The instructions on the screen don't actually show you that these buttons function, so you don't really know when you're able to zoom out and zoom in, and you can miss stuff in different menus. And the other thing too is that it's not cohesive. Some menus, such as the clothing menus, allow you to zoom in more than other menus later on when you're doing different kind of fashion things and so on. And then there's another problem. All the different clothing themselves have to be selected in layers, and some clothes obviously conflict with each other. You can't put on pants and a dress at the same time in most situations, especially with like mini skirts or things like that. And the game puts a little small round exclamation point beside any particular clothing that's going to clash with another one. So if you select that clothing, it will overwrite the one that it doesn't match with and remove it. However, the problem is you don't know that's going to happen necessarily. If you miss and you press that button, that clothing's off, and it doesn't give you the option to say, oh no, I don't want to do that. It gives you a warning saying that the clothing that is in conflict will come off, but it doesn't actually allow you to back up and undo that action. There is an actual undo button, but that undo button only works one step backwards, and if you close that menu at all and go back to the main fashion menu, that undo gets erased. So if you're not paying attention, it can be very easy to press the wrong button and lose several layers of clothing that you spend a lot of time searching for. the clothing themselves looks pretty good, and there's a lot of really interesting choices to have. Of course, your closet is more limited than what's available in the actual production company, but there's a lot of really cute stuff here, and I really like what they've done. The game visually looks great in this area. The clothing, for the most part, is good. There's a few clipping problems where a bag will go through a shirt or something like that. But there's also lots of cute English and really bad English on some of the shirts. You get things like girls love and I fight like a girl spelled without an H. Yeah, it's very what you'd expect from Japan. Moving on from here, you go to the production agency where you're going to get your first look at being a model who's going to sort of be your agent, I guess you could say. It's going to help you work with the Nicola company. And the first thing that you have to do is do a promotional shot, and this is just basically taking a photo. So you meet the staff, including some boyfriend material if you're interested in boys, which I'm not, so, you know, whatever. Probably skip that section of the game, but there is a boyfriend section of the game. But at any rate, you meet your different coworkers and you go on to take your promotional photo. Here the game gives you a variety of different poses to choose from, all in different genres. Simple poses, cool poses, girly poses, and unique poses. And the majority of these poses are fairly standard Japanese fare that you might see some model or some cute girl in an anime doing, and a lot of them are a little too much for me, but if you really work hard, you can find something that you might like, and you can actually find some poses that really match with the different outfits quite well. And also is the ability to change your face, your I would say facial pose is I guess one way to put it. And basically what this allows you to do is position the eyes to look in a certain direction, or blink, or have your mouth open, have your mouth closed, and that sort of thing. And it all combines to make a shot that's visually appealing for the cameras. You select what you want, you press the photo button, and then it goes into a section where you take your photos. The cutscene will show a variety of photos being taken, but in the end you'll end up with 4, one of which, the top left always, is the pose that you chose, and then the other 3 are alternate poses that were taken during the photo shoot, which I've found usually don't really fit all that well with the costumes. I think I've maybe used one alternate in the 6 or 7 different promotional shots that I've done so far. However, you can choose which one you want, and so I usually go with the one that I chose. Again, the menus here are a little clunky. When you switch between the different genres, in the other menus you can use the D-pad to do this. In this menu, you cannot use the D-pad, you use the analog stick, which is really inconsistent, and while it doesn't necessarily distract from the actual gameplay itself, it's just very confusing, especially if you were going to give this to a teenager who's not really all that familiar with games or game consoles. The next part of the game, which I think is my favorite, is the design parts, and this is where you're essentially designing a promotional photograph, a magazine insert, or a magazine cover. Now, in the initial one, you just are doing a promotional photograph. However, later on, you have the option to do title, which includes a title if it were, say, a magazine cover. And what you can do here is you can choose from a variety of different backgrounds. You can move your character around, you can change the position a little bit, you can rotate them, you can size them, and that sort of thing. You can also choose some different frames, and you can decorate the cover. Now, the Japanese style of a Nicola magazine cover is completely and totally covered 100% full with every amount of text and glitter and cute hearts and tiny little decorative pieces you can possibly think of. There's barely enough space for a solid color background or a basic pattern background and a tiny bit of the model's actual face, and the rest is just wall to wall clutter, unfortunately, I have to say. And I really love the way this game gives you the ability to do your own designs that are less cluttered and still do something good. You don't have to put a million bajillion things on there like it was a teenage girl's, decorated notebook. You do have the option to do auras, which allows you to put sort of a glow around your character, which I find is really good for creating a neat shadow effect or something to make your character just pop out from the background. Now, the backgrounds themselves are great. there's some really great stuff here. The different visual images all have different genres and styles. There's everything from cute styles to actual photographs, and it just really stands out. There's some pastels, there's some streaks and lines, and there's all kinds of different patterns. There's photographs that are quite realistic, and then there's these decorative frames, and those can combine to create some really unique, really beautiful looking stuff. It all depends on your design sense and what kind of style you like, but if you really take the time in this section, you can create some quite appealing stuff that I would frankly want to buy if I were buying a magazine. After you've made your design, you will then submit it, and you will gain a certain number of fans, and you'll see fan comments saying things like, "Wow, I want to buy that outfit myself," or "Wow, this made me buy the new magazine," "Oh, you're so cute," "Oh, please take care of your body," and things like that. And gaining fans and also gaining money from your promotional work is how you advance the story and the plot of the game, because you need to move up in the modeling world. And I think this is an element of the game that, while it will probably get repetitive, is the major contrast to me with Style Savvy, because Style Savvy was always about owning your own fashion store and trying to maintain that store. So you're always trying to buy new clothes for the store and deal with customers all the time, and that part of it got a little bit tedious over time. In this game, you're more focused on trying to succeed as a model for the Nicola magazine, and you will meet the editor for the Nicola magazine, who will then give you a series of jobs, and what you're essentially going to be asked to do is create promotional things for a section of the magazine, and you'll do these bi-monthly, and each month you have certain things you have to do. For example, in the beginning you start out with creating a different promotion for each season. So there's a fall promotion, a spring promotion, and so on and so forth. And depending on your different choices, you can really design your character and your hairstyles and colors and things like that to match that season. And you can do some really fun, cool stuff with it. Again, the interface itself is a bit clunky, but what you can get with the end result is actually quite good. And this, to me, is the part of the game that really works quite well. The music while doing all this is also quite catchy and fun. So you need to make your goals, you need to make your deadlines, and as you do that, you open up new things. After you submit your first 4 images, you then have a new set of options that become available, such as the ability to go to a fashion store, or change your hairstyles, or change things like makeup and color contacts. And these allow you a much bigger range of things that you can do, and I think probably make the game more interesting. However, I have not actually gotten far enough into those to really explore just how much you can do with them, so the jury's still out on how much they actually impact the game. I have to admit that I was really impressed with the variety of things that you can do early on in just the first 4 promotional photos that you do. Doing spring, fall, summer, and winter, not in that order, of course, because I can't remember the seasons, was really quite fun, and I created something unique for each one of them that I felt really proud of. And actually, I think as someone who enjoys design and visual design and that kind of thing, this is the most fun part of the game to tinker with, and I think that if you're playing the game, you'll enjoy it as well. Now, while I have not unlocked any of them yet, looking at all the different menus and also looking online at different promotional videos, it does appear that there's even more things that you can do, such as special events, stage shows, perhaps actual fashion shows and things like that, which gives you more to do beyond just the basic magazine design. And I think probably once I get there, this is going to turn out to be a fairly full and actually enjoyable game. So I would say that overall, my experience so far, just playing it for an hour or 2, has been that I found it quite enjoyable as someone who actually enjoys fashion games quite a lot, even though I'm not very good at fashion in real life. I think that this is a solid 6.5 out of 10. It's got some interface problems and it doesn't always look great, but when it does look great, it looks really great. And despite those interface problems and the little confusing elements here and there, it is a game that is great to look at, sounds great, and is quite enjoyable to play. Again, if you're into fashion. I have no idea whether or not this game will come to America and see an English release, because it is such a Japanese style with a Japanese magazine and probably some licensing issues. It's difficult to say whether or not this will get an American release, but if you are interested in a game like this and you have a little bit of Japanese experience, or if you do want to take all the time to sit there with Google Translate, you can actually have quite a lot of fun with this game, and the majority of it is fairly self-explanatory, with you really needing to do things like matching the keywords for themes as the main Japanese that you really need to know. The rest is somewhat unimportant. So please check that out if you enjoy it, and of course, if you enjoyed this video, please follow and subscribe and all that fun stuff. And also, we have a podcast as well where I talk a lot more about a lot more games that are not quite fashion based. So if you're really interested in games, especially retro games from Japan or retro PCs from Japan, please check out Doors and Dungeons. You can find it on iTunes or Spotify and various different places if you just do a standard Google search for Doors and Dungeons.